Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, where each week I take a deep dive into a film and continuing my ride through Stanley Kubrick's filmography. I'm joined here by Heath, who is a fellow writer here at SiftPop, and we're going to be talking about Dr. Strangelove today. But before we get into the actual show, I'm going to let Heath introduce himself a little bit because this is the first time he's on the channel.
Yep. My name's Heath Lynch. I am a avid movie fan. Have been for as long as I can remember, and was never really much into writing or participating in podcasts or YouTube videos of this nature. But I was always the guy in my friend group or in my family that when someone wanted an opinion on a movie, hey, is this one worth seeing? What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is going to win the Oscar or whatever? Everyone always seemed to come to me and tell me, you seem to know a lot about this. So I decided, yeah, sure, I'll start to do more about this, and got into writing recently. This year got into writing for SiftPop, and so yeah, that's how I'm here and into movies, and happy to be here with you, Shane. So thank you for bringing me on.
I appreciate having you. And he's going to be joining Lost in the Wasteland as well. So you're going to get a little bit more of his personal tastes and thoughts on movies in that show. But today we're going to go to maybe the darkest of comedies, where it's like, should I be laughing at this? But yes, you 100% should. Before we jump into that, we start with our coming attractions, and this episode is dropping on July 30th. So taking a look at what's coming out, because everybody's super excited about the 2 hour and 40-minute long Disney live action film based off of another ride from Disney, Jungle Cruise. Yeah. So that's coming out in theaters and also on Disney Plus Premier Access, all your $29.99 if you're down for that. We also have Stillwater, which is Tom McCarthy's new film, who had directed Spotlight, and now this one has Matt Damon. This is coming from Focus Features. I hopefully will be getting a screener on that sometime next week. I'm looking forward to that, but there's no contest for me for this coming weekend. So I'm going to let Heath talk a little bit about why he is so excited about The Green Knight, and then I will add my thoughts.
Yeah. So Jungle Cruise, that'll be fine. It's another Disney live action adventure. Hooray. Stillwater, again, I love Spotlight, so I'm definitely going to give that a shot, but I am stoked for The Green Knight. I wanted to see this when it was supposed to come out last year, but it was a wounded victim of the pandemic, and it itself was one of the many features that was pushed off. And so now here it is coming out this year. I think there's just something inherently captivating in Western culture about Arthurian mythology. There's no really simpler way to say it than that. Yep. King Arthur is cool. Finding a sword in the lake that grants you the power to be a king is a fun story, or Sword in the Stone, depending on the variation. But these tales have been around for hundreds of years, and how true or not remotely true, it doesn't matter in terms of their intrigue. And to see this more mystical take on this Arthurian legend coming out, where we have actual like undead creatures and giants, and especially in an era where we have such great prosthetics and practical effects to make these visuals really pop, the cinematography, at least based off of the trailers and clips I've seen here and there, make this film look exquisite. At least in my mind, obviously we're only halfway through the year. One of the front runners for best cinematography of the year. Mm-hmm. And I'm also a huge Dev Patel fan. I think he is terrific. I've loved him since I first saw him in Slumdog Millionaire a decade ago, and I've seen him a couple times here and there ever since. He was in Lion. Most recently, one of the many David Copperfields that came out the other year.
I really enjoyed that. What came out last year?
Another quirky one. But yeah, so something about this just looks fun. It looks like a dark, brooding, moody take on an Arthurian legend, and I just want to see it. It looks like the exact kind of artistry and intrigue that makes fantasy high end. It looks like something that would be akin to the Lord of the Rings movies 20 years ago, but a more souped up modern tale in that kind of realm where we could get that kind of fantasy feel that we don't really get many fantasy movies that much anymore these days. So I'm really excited about it.
There's very specific kinds of fantasy films we get and sci-fi films because, like, to be honest, most of them coming out are superhero movies and stuff like that, and it's so hard to make fantasy work. It really is. Like, I would argue it's the hardest genre to actually make work in film.
I would agree.
And that's why they've
to make work convincingly.
Yes, which is why they've screwed up so many adaptations of fantasy stories. And, like, obviously, my favorite films of all time, anybody who's watched this channel or heard me talk about Lord of the Rings will know, I absolutely love Lord of the Rings. And David Lowery, who's directing this film, has such an interesting filmography because you have the Disney live action remake of Peach Dragon, which if honestly, I enjoy more than the original one. Like, the original one's like campy, you have a big giant like hand-drawn dragon in it. But like, this was heartfelt and poignant, and it had a very different kind of feel to it. And then you have something like A Ghost Story, which is one of the strangest, most interesting experiences. Whoever thought you would get a film where you could just watch Rooney Mara just sit there and eat a pie? And Casey Affleck literally walking around with a sheet over his head, walking around like a ghost. And even in one of his most recent films, The Old Man with the Gun, with Robert Redford in it, and Sissy Spacek, was a really wonderful little film. And then you have this. I remember sitting in a theater when this trailer dropped and my jaw dropped because I'm like, what is this? And it looks so much bigger than any A24 film that I've seen. I'm like, did they like dump their whole entire year's profit into this movie? And it just from Dev Patel being such an amazing actor, and like all the reviews coming up that I've seen is this has been described as fantastical and sexy. I'm like, wasn't expecting. I saw that today. I'm like, interesting. But Dev Patel's such a fantastic actor. I know you mentioned Slumdog Millionaire. He was in Lion. I loved the what was Personal History of David Copperfield from Armando Iannucci, who I'm a huge fan of. And it's cool seeing Dev Patel working with directors like that and like David Lowery. And then Ralph Ineson, who like his voice is just so recognizable. And when you hear it in the trailer, I'm like, well, he's continuing. He was in The Witch with A24 and now he's in this. And I remember watching that first trailer, and that second that giant hand reached over that mountain, I'm like, I'm in. What is this? And it's striking.
I think I pretty much I have the same thought when I saw the trailer. I was like, yes, me. Yep, sign me up. Awesome. But I remember even before that, just seeing, like, I like to, in January, just check out the list. Hey, what are the names of some movies coming out this year that we know about so far? And this was last year, again, pre-pandemic. We didn't know what was going to happen, but there was this movie on the docket called The Green Knight. And I was like the old Arthur Legend Green Knight? And like, so that's when I started looking it up. So I'm really been excited for it too, even before the trailer. But then the trailer just cemented it. I was like, oh, this is beautiful. This is so bizarre. I can't wait to absorb this.
And like, basically, if you see anything with A24 on it, at least you know it's going to be bold, ambitious, and at least interesting.
Yeah, if it's going to miss, at least it's going to be a big swing and a miss. Like, they don't back down. They don't go half-assed. They're going to try, and I love A24 for that. Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we're both excited for The Green Knight, and hopefully all of you out there are, and go support this movie because I want to see more things like this. Yep. And if people don't go see it, then they don't make more things like this. Please go watch it. But
even as a slight aside, even Jungle Cruise, like, as much as it's another Disney movie and it's based off another Disney ride, it's still an action adventure movie that, like you said, we don't get money in these anymore because they've all that realm, that dollar amount has been allocated to the superhero films. And I like superhero films. Yeah. I'm a huge DC Marvel fanboy, but I still I want these two, like something like The Mummy from 1999 with Brendan Fraser. Like, why can't we have more adventure films like this anymore? They're great. So even something as simple as Jungle Cruise, go support that too, because I have a feeling it's going to be a kind of crazy, outlandish adventure, and we need to see more of these. I don't always need to see giant superpowered dude punching giant alien dude.
All I need is an actual human giant superhero punching dude, like The Rock. So, because he doesn't need superpowers. Look at him.
Just look at him. He is,
Which I love Emily Blunt too. So I'm like, I'm gonna enjoy this cast. And even like the one tiny shot in the trailer where they showed Jesse Plemons coming up out of his submarine and him being like so flamboyant and over the top, just like, hello. I'm just like, what is this movie? But they're trying to make a new Pirates, and you know what? If this works and it's a lot of fun, why not?
Yeah,
make them.
Let them do it.
Go ahead, Disney. Like, you need our permission. But shifting gears into our feature film of the week, which is Dr. Strangelove, which is a 1962 film from Stanley Kubrick. And this is the point I feel like in Kubrick's filmography, because like, as you all should go check out my Lolita episode, that's a film probably like my least favorite of his films, and also very interesting watch and a little uncomfortable watch. Actually, a little more than a little uncomfortable. But this is really where I feel like Kubrick kind of gets into, this is Stanley Kubrick. And from here on, all of his films are so very much his. And it's interesting because this is his last black and white film.
Yep.
And then we get 2001: A Space Odyssey and all of its amazing glory, which I'm excited for that episode. But we're here to talk about Dr. Strangelove. So, Heath, what are some of your thoughts about this film in general?
My first thought, and everyone should know this thought, it's incredibly important. It's not, but it is. Know the full title of this movie. If you're ever playing charades, you can mess up the other team so hard. So the full title of this movie, for those who don't know, is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. That is a humdinger of a title, and it's great. No, I love this movie. It is one of the darkest and most bizarre comedies ever made. You could find this movie absolutely hilarious and not laugh once during the whole movie. That's just the kind of tone and exploration that it has. Simultaneously, you could watch this movie and hate it because it is incredibly dark and dry. Or you could be like me, where when I watch this, I double over laughing, because to me, I can't see an alternative other than laughing, because if I don't laugh, it's so morbid that holy crap, what kind of person am I to not laugh at this film? It is a grotesque painting and portrait of American society during the Cold War era, US versus Russia, and all the implications that had from the end of World War II all the way up into the 80s. And I think this movie was made in 64, I believe. And so this is right at the height of things, right in the middle of everything. And it just has such a poignant understanding of how bizarre the world we lived in at that time was, and how to proactively attack politicians and the military, and our approach to living in this era, dealing with things such as whether or not we actually care about the missile gap, or mutually assured destruction, whether it's actually poignant to build fallout shelters, and just so much hysteria that was a part of everyday life for people in this time that grew up and lived in this world. And Stanley looks at all of this and goes, this is all crap. This is really stupid. We are doing everything the wrong way because we don't want to just take the time to talk to each other or listen to one another. And because of that, we are all gung-ho on killing ourselves. And if I don't shine a light on this, who will? And it's great. It's just so surreal, but I love it.
Yeah, watching this film, so much of this film works on so many different levels because you can take a look at the themes and what it's pulling this really dark satire on, and whether it's geopolitical things, even just human nature. There's some really interesting commentary on just the idea of how humans interact with each other and deal with situations, and how this script is so interesting in the way that this narrative goes, because it challenges you, because you basically have what, three different realms that you deal with in this film. You have this bomber fighter, which it's completely serious. They're all doing their thing. They have a mission. And of course, you have somebody like Slim Pickens, cowboy hat in tow, flying this. And of course, probably the most iconic shot in the whole entire film of him riding that bomb in like a rodeo with his cowboy hat. Because if anybody's seen anything from this film, it's probably that shot.
Yeah.
And also James Earl Jones, who has a small role on the plane. Yeah. But in any other film, we're sitting there, please let them do their mission. And the film is shot in a way that when you're with them, you're rooting for them because it's filmed like they're the heroes. And the thing is, like, why wouldn't they be?
Like war music in the background, like in a snare drum beat. Like, it's encouraging the militarism, and we're proud of our boys and the whole thing.
And why wouldn't we be? They're American soldiers. We want them to win. But the thing is, if they complete their mission, the whole entire world is effed. Yeah. And that's such a dark thing to play around with from a story perspective, because, like, who do you root for? The film's taunting you to root for who you think you should root for, but the thing is, if you do, you're rooting for the destruction of humanity.
Yeah.
And the details of this, because I think it's real easy to get lost in all the jokes and everything, but there's very specific details throughout this film that lead up to a lot of great tension. It's just like, why can't they shoot this down? Because they're flying so low to the ground, they can't pick up on radar. And all those like sprinkled little details throughout this between what Ripper, Sterling Hayden, who this is his second film with Stanley Kubrick after The Killing, and him as Ripper is so messed up, and he's just like,
that's such a weird character.
It's just like the prototypical paranoid military man who's also so obsessed with masculinity and sexuality, and you're just like, why is he talking about fluids? And like, what's a lot? Like, what's going on here? And you have the plane, you have the base, and he's under fire, and the lengths he'll go. And quick shout out to that one soldier who comes in afterwards, and Mandrake's trying to convince him that he needs to use the phone. He's like, do you have any change to like shoot the machine? It's like, I'll do it, but you'll have to answer to the Coca-Cola Corporation. I laugh at that so much because that's just a nice little jab at that capitalistic idea of everything, where it's just like, the world's gonna end. Who cares? Just get the change out of it. And of course, the war room, which is just chock full of so many great characters. And before we started recording, George C. Scott, who is, I feel like, one of the most underappreciated actors for at least people like our age. I know he was like a big actor in his time, but between, like, I remember the first time I saw him was in the TV remake of 12 Angry Men. He played Lee J. Cobb's character, juror number 3. And then my grandfather fought under Patton in World War II, and I remember watching Patton with him as a kid. And of course, he won the Oscar. He didn't want it though.
No, he didn't at all.
He did not. He did not agree with, you can't compare these.
Yeah. I remember him from Patton, and I remember him from The Hustler, which was
Yes.
a pool shark movie with Paul Newman, and he was. It's been a while since I've seen it, but like kind of his manager, but
Yep.
also kind of like skimmed him out of his money, and so he ended up being kind of a villain in while also being Paul Newman's like director of operations. It was weird, but
it's a interesting dynamic in that film because you have Minnesota Fats, who set up Jackie Gleason as your villain, but who's the one really doing the damage? And George C. Scott's great in that too. But this film, and there's a lot of like thoughts about like the behind the scenes of like Scott did not want to play this for laughs. He wanted to play this very seriously. And Kubrick made him do so many takes that after a while he just did the most over the top takes he could possibly do. And that's exactly what Kubrick wanted him to do. And I think the one line in this movie that gets me the most, that I think speaks so much to just human nature, is humans always have to find something, no matter what it is, something to hate, something to perseverate about, something. And the whole entire movie is like, we have a missile gap. And then, missiles become defunct. Who needs missiles anymore? And then it's like, Mr. President, we cannot allow a mine shaft gap. And like the whole entire idea of now they're fighting over mine shafts and stuff like that. It's just like, this character is so driven by that obsession. And it's so poignant in terms of human nature. And I just laugh at it because George C. Scott's whole line delivery and his whole like body just reaction to it is so great.
Yeah. There's also a couple other parts that I love about the movie and how it handles itself. First is, if you went into this movie and I just gave it to you blind, didn't tell you a dang thing about it, you would actually think it's serious and that it is not a satire and that it's not a comedy, because for the first 10 to 15 minutes of this film, the movie wants you to think this is real. It does not let you know that the general is crazy. It legit like makes you think, no, we are on, this is it. Like, we're dropping the nukes, it's happening. There's no hint whatsoever that the general has lost his mind, he's gone rogue, he is using code R to drop the bombs because he wants to. It's not until 10 or 15 minutes later that you actually get that realization that, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And at that moment, the film snaps into two parts. The film snaps into a narrative, which is driven by fear and is a representation of the embodiment of the Cold War. But we, as the audience, snap into a different lane, which is, we're now realizing it's a satire. And we are able to laugh at the absurdity of the reality that these characters are experiencing, which is real fear. And that's that juxtaposition that lets us as an audience, and especially the audiences back in 1964, realize like, oh my gosh, this world we live in is really stupid. Like, this is how we look. This is what we're saying. This is what we're doing to ourselves. And it's that kind of perspective that allows us as human beings. Sometimes you just have, like, someone has to shine the mirror, put it right in front of you so you can see like, oh, what we're crazy. We're really stupid right now. And sometimes you need that. And this movie just was the perfect medicine for that time. And although I don't think a lot of people took the message to heart, a lot of people did. And that's why it resonates so well as one of the greatest comedies, dark political satires of all time, maybe the best ever to date. So I love that about it. And then you talk about the war room. You know, if there's one famous scene or shot of the film, it's definitely riding the bomb rodeo style down to destruction. But I don't think there's a greater line than, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. And just, I think that line in and of itself embodies the film. That this is how dumb we've gotten, that we can't even see the own hypocrisy and idiocy in our own words that we're speaking anymore. Like, we're literally talking about nuclear war, and you're worried about them having a pushing match on the buffet line. It's so uncanny that you can't help but laugh.
It's so funny because, and we haven't even talked about Peter Sellers at this point,
Yeah.
who's like,
gotta save him. He's the
yeah,
morsel that this movie
and
keeps on giving.
with how the president is portrayed in this film and how much he cares about politeness, and it's like, we have to have decorum in here, and like, he just sounds so sad so often in this. And like, that is just such a great image of George C. Scott wrestling around with the Russian ambassador, and they're just like flung over a bench, and like the president just walks up and is like, gentlemen. It's like, and then when he gets on the phone with the Russian premier, who's also drunk, mind you, which is so funny. And
drunk, and I'm pretty sure he was having sex, if I
yes,
remember correctly.
which they have a couple of moments, like there's a lot of sexuality in this film.
Yeah, that's actually an understated theme that a lot of people don't pick up on, because the blatant theme, the smack you in your face theme, is the Cold War. But the understated theme is sexuality, and how we perceive sexuality and how it influences our decisions is a big aspect of this film as well. You even slightly mentioned it earlier, but like, even like the big board that they talk about, like, it's literally the visual representation of sperm going to an egg, like, over and over. Or when the titular Dr. Strangelove finally stands at the end of the movie, it's because he's the physical embodiment of an erection, because he's getting so excited over the fact that he can choose who genetically gets to survive in the mine shafts with him, and like, his full-on fascist Nazi tendencies can come out, and he gets so excited that he becomes erect and physically stands up and, mein Führer, I can walk. Like, the whole movie is littered with this ridiculous sense of sexuality.
And the hilarious thing is, he has what, 2 sequences in the whole entire film. Strange.
Only in the movie in 2 scenes.
Yeah, and
grand total of like maybe 4 or 5 minutes of screen time.
And that is the point where this film reaches complete absurdity.
Yep.
And I feel like it's the introduction of characters that help us get to that point where, like, when they introduce George C. Scott's character, and instead we don't see him at first. We see his secretary in her lingerie answering the phone that he's in a busy meeting. And you're just like, what kind of busy meeting is he in? Because like, he is the prototypical, just like hyped up on masculinity, and like, basically he's just thinking with his dick the whole entire time.
Yeah, the whole time. The scene that always cracks me up, and it's a very subtle scene. It's not one of the blatant ones that we've discussed, but it's when they're in the war room and the president is confronting George C. Scott, the general, Turgidson, with a sequence of questions of, how did we get to here? What transpired? Why are we sending nukes? And what can we do to stop it? And the president will give a question, and then Turgidson will just be like, yeah, but here's why. And he just comes out with this pause. He lifts himself, he goes back down, and he gives this gravelly voice of how, nope, Mr. President, you're wrong. Here's why, what you think is wrong, and here's what's actually happened, and here's why we can do nothing about it. And essentially, it's just him trying to get the president off his back, because it's funny that the general that went crazy and ordered this in the beginning, they're kind of parallels of each other. They actually kind of want the same thing.
Yeah.
Whereas the general that went crazy, he wants us to drop bombs just because he wants us to kind of get it over with. Like he is so in fear of this Cold War, this pressure that's looming over them, that he just wants to get it done. Let's just go in, drop the bombs. If I force the bombs to be dropped, it'll force the government to send in the army, and we have to fight the war now and just get it done. And we may take some casualties, but at least it's over and we can move on with our lives. Whereas Turgidsen's like, this is awesome. Let's go in there and we're gonna. Oh, I didn't do it, Mr. President, but this general, he did this. So like now we might as well go in with everything we have and kill everyone. And if they hit us back and we take 10, 20% tops of casualties, it's fine. Like 20 million people, it's fine. It's fine. Like, and he just, they're parallel. They have the same objective, but for entirely different reasons, and it's so funny how they go about it.
That sequence, and then the sequence later where it's like, what are the chances of them actually completing this mission? And then he gets so excited about talking about how great our guys are and they can go in there, and like he comes to his own realization that, oh, like we don't actually want that. And that fits so well in the rest of the film because it's still feeding into whenever we cut to that plane, we want them to succeed because they're the good guys. And it's like,
yeah, they legit think everything's gone to hell. This is their chance. And when their plane gets struck by a missile and they can't even make their primary target, like they're deflated. They're like, oh my gosh, how much do we suck? The world's going to hell. Americans are dying and we can't even get to our primary target. Like, you feel for them because they genuinely care. They're just trying to do their job. The definition of trying to just do their job. Not that was a good excuse for Nazis, but but that's the point. Even that is the parallel. Like, yeah, it's your job, but this shouldn't be your job.
And it's so interesting too, because it's like we focus so much on like, and I think what's so interesting is this is like pre-Vietnam.
Yeah.
It's like this would have fit in so well in the 70s because it would be like how much was put on the troops when it's like, who sent them there?
Yeah.
And this is like 10 years before our country got to that point of like completely being like, this is off the wall. No. And Kubrick has such he has his fingers on the pulse of people, and he presents them in such the most challenging and intriguing ways that I absolutely love, because like all of his films take those dark human things and puts them in the forefront. And whether it's
a lot of movies and a lot of directors do that, where they'll shy away from this, like, oh, we know that's a part of actual reality, but we're not going to talk about that. We'll talk about this other aspect that's tertiarily related, but we're like, Kubrick doesn't do that. No, this is what this is what our politicians are actually doing to the world.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about it, and it's bold of him to do that, and he's rewarded for it by making such a masterpiece of a film.
Yep. This is the man that made a giant spaceship in 2001, the shape of a sperm.
Yep.
And then somebody turns into a giant baby at the end. He is looking at these things and putting it in your face and seeing what you're going to do about it. And I think all the way up until the very end, when the bombs start dropping and that music that starts playing over the bombs dropping,
yep,
like it's some kind of beautiful dance of just boom. And
yep,
like all the way up into the end, it's just like, yep, you all are going to cause this someday. And
sorry for spoilers on an almost 60-year-old movie, but like, yeah, it's odd. Even when I know the ending, because I've seen the movie before, you think the whole movie, like, oh, they're going to make it. They're not actually going to drop the bombs. They're going to turn all the planes around. Like, it's going to work out. Like, there's no way Kubrick would end the movie like that. Like, he's a dark guy, but like, no, like everyone's dead. It's all over. No shying away from anything.
Except
Hundreds of millions of people dead. Bombs are dropping everywhere. It's done. Humanity's toast.
except for all the politicians that get into their mine shafts and
Yeah.
have let what 8 women to every one
10
man.
to 1 women to men ratio.
Just like, but doctor, isn't that shying away from the traditional American family unit? It's just like,
Yeah.
and just like he knows the answer and he wants that to be the answer. And I love that line too, because it just sheds that light on that hypocrisy of like, we want this traditional thing, but yeah, we'll sleep with 10 women if we have to.
If we have to.
If we have to. And it's just like, of course you would. And
yeah,
who's surprised about that? Nobody.
No one.
Between him getting riled up the whole entire film, him chomping away on his gum the entire movie.
I swear the guy goes through like 5 packs of gum through the whole movie. Like the subtle physical humor throughout the movie about him chewing gum, or Dr. Strangelove trying so hard not to salute Hitler, is just one of the best big gags ever. And the movie's full of weird stuff like that. Or like you mentioned earlier, just the rogue general's obsession with bodily fluids and the putting fluoride in the toothpaste and in the water, and just all this bizarre stuff that just makes the movie so perfect in its quirkiness.
It's a wonder that something like this got made, and especially in 1964, when this was like the height of the Cold War, and Kubrick's just like, yeah, this is gonna happen. And it's just like, I can't even imagine something like that being released in theaters in the height of something with so much paranoia and fear, and just being like, somebody had the balls to make this movie, and it was Stanley Kubrick. But Heath, do you have any final thoughts or any big takeaways that you want to share with our audience about why they should check out Dr. Strangelove?
So before we get into that, I mentioned it earlier, we should save it to the end. We have to talk about Peter Sellers. So Peter Sellers, for those who don't know, was a multiple role character player in this film. Nowadays, you see this much more commonly. Mike Myers is famous for it in the Austin Powers movies. Eddie Murphy's done it in I don't know how many films. Like you see this, especially in comedies. Tyler Perry does it in the Medea movies a lot. It happens a lot, but 60 years ago, not so much. And Peter Sellers plays not 1, not 2, but 3 characters in this film. He plays the President of the United States. He plays a British RAF Lieutenant Colonel, or Captain Lieutenant, I forget his rank. And then he plays the titular Dr. Strangelove himself. He's literally playing a British lackey, essentially. He's playing the American President of the United States, and he's playing a German ex-Nazi scientist that is wheelchair bound. These are entirely different characters with entirely different accents that he pulls them all off perfectly, by the way. And they all have insanely different perceptions on the current events, how to approach them, how to talk to people. They all have incredibly different motivations with what they want out of the scenario. And if you don't go into the movie knowing that, you will think these are 3 different actors. There's no way you think this is the same person. Maybe you might pick up on like 1 to 1, but there's no way you pick up on all 3 of these being the same person. And he is incredible in this. Even down to like, I love when he's the British RAF pilot and he's trying to appease this mad general and just be like, oh, I'll like placate him. Yeah, that's fine. Like, oh, you want to give me, we don't have to give them the code, but you can give me the code, right? We can be friends, we can be pals. And even though he realizes how insane everything is that's going on around him, but then the president is bold and brash to everyone in the war room, but then he gets on the phone with the Russian premiere, and he's a coward. And then Doctor Strangelove is, there's really no way to describe Doctor Strangelove unless you've seen the movie, but just picture a mad German Nazi in a wheelchair that really wants Nazis to still be around, but he can't say that. So he just happens to work for the American government as a weapons specialist who also still has fascist ideologies. And it's insane that this guy did all three of these roles. And he was rewarded for it. He got an Academy Award nomination for this for Best Actor. I think the film got, I have it here, 4 Oscar nominations. Sellers got one for Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Kubrick got 2 nominations for Best Picture and for Best Director, all of which are incredibly earned. But I really wanted to point out Sellers is doing phenomenal work here, especially in a comedy. Comedies don't get appreciated much, especially by the Academy and the institutions that do awards in the first place. So it really is noteworthy that this happened. When you do go to see the film, because you should, keep that in mind. But in terms of last thoughts and why you should see it, it really is, it's one of the greatest, and again, we've already said this, political satires ever, if not the best. It's been inducted into the Library of Congress for its cultural relevance, and it will be preserved for all time. It was, I think, one of the initial batch of 25 films to be preserved. It is that powerful and impactful of a film. And again, you might not be doubling over laughing, because it is, to give you the most blunt warning I can, it is incredibly dry humor. Like the movie will never laugh along with you. You have to laugh at the film. But if you can, this can be one of the most rewarding and rewatchable experiences you would ever believe is out there.
And that's the thing, because like everybody is playing it straight enough. Like the closest you get to like straight parody is Strangelove.
Strangelove himself,
and
it's not even in the movie that much.
And the whole entire thing where you're just like, and that hand just won't stay down. It was such a good
not salute Hitler.
Such a great gag that even Mel Brooks had to steal it for Young Frankenstein. But, and a little side note too about Peter Sellers, because he was in Lolita as well, and he steals a show in that too, because he plays one character who's kind of playing some different characters at different points in the film, and Sellers can just, he was such an amazing actor, and he died, he wasn't even like 60 when he passed away.
He passed away.
Just really sad.
He really is a legend, even in a short time. It's a shame, because he could have given us more, but I mean, he was the Pink Panther. He was James Bond before James Bond, when they did a parody of Casino Royale before Sean Connery and MGM did real James Bond movies. Like he did a lot of stuff.
And I think the most important thing here is, like he said, go into this. It helps knowing that it's okay to laugh at this movie, because the film's not going to. It is dark and dry, and it's an impressive screenplay. It's impeccable direction, and it has such an amazing cast in this film, and everybody's firing on all cylinders. And that's why this is such a masterpiece and has gone down in history as one of the all-time greats. Now, shifting gears into our final segment for the show is some of our recommendations. So I'm going to let Heath go first. I'm very excited about his recommendation.
Yeah, so I had a whole bunch I could choose from, but I went with Prisoners, I believe it's 2012 or 2013 film by Denis Villeneuve. And I had not seen it before. I hate myself that I took this long to see it. But I freaking loved it. It was amazing. The whole time I kept thinking to myself, like, is this a masterpiece? Like, no, this can't, no, well, it's really good. Like, no, it's not like 5 out of 5. No, I think it might be 5, like the whole movie. And then by the end, I'm just like, oh yeah, no, this is just perfection. and how you define perfect is different for everyone. There is no such thing as an actually perfect film. Art is subjective. It's not possible. But to each of us, there is a sense of individuality that can provide perfection. And I judge perfection off of the best that a movie could possibly be for what it was trying to aim for. And I do not think that this film could be done any better. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous, and one of the first things you'll take note of when you watch this is done by the incredible Roger Deakins, who is arguably the greatest cinematographer ever.
Because he is.
Because he is. And again, I already said directed by Denis, who wasn't getting quite the reputation and appreciation he was back then, because things like Arrival hadn't come out yet. But I don't know a single person that likes film that's not excited for Dune when that comes out later this year, and that's his.
All those character posters just dropped.
Oh my gosh, I lost my mind when I saw this. So it already has this incredible cast or crew behind it. And then you add the cast onto it. You have Hugh Jackman, who, if you are a millennial, you grew up with the X-Men movies, he's your Wolverine, and you've known him for, at this point, 20 years. But he can do so much more than that. And he's illustrated that before, especially a lot in musicals with Les Mis or the controversial Greatest Showman and things in between. But he also can do serious, and he can do drama. And in many ways, his character in Prisoners makes his perspective of the film a horror. He's terrifying. He's intimidating and menacing, and you would not want to cross paths with this character for fear of your own life. And he plays it so well. And I'm not talking like, oh, Wolverine menacing, like, I'm superhero, I can kill you. No, like, I'm way more scared of Hugh Jackman in Prisoners than I would be a friggin' Wolverine Hugh Jackman. And that should tell you something. But then beyond that, you also have Jake Gyllenhaal, who is arguably one of the greatest actors we have working right now, who is, in my opinion, incredibly underappreciated, not so much by audiences and critics, but awards recognition. He doesn't get the respect he deserves. But these two lead this film in such a powerful and impactful way. And so what the film is, it's a crime thriller about a town where every so often, unfortunately, kids go missing. And no one knows why, no one knows where they go, no one ever finds them. And Hugh Jackman's daughter goes missing. And Jake Gyllenhaal is a local cop who is tasked with trying to find it. And Jake, at least so long as he's been on the force in this town, has a perfect record. He's never not solved a case. And so this is incredibly unique juxtaposition of, well, you have this guy who's a perfectionist trying to solve the case versus in like a very nuanced and methodical way versus Hugh Jackman, who just wants his daughter back and is entirely emotionally driven, does not give a damn about procedure or the quote unquote right way to go about things. And it creates this unique parallel throughout the film where you empathize with Hugh Jackman's character for the loss of his daughter, but you hate the actions and course of events that he triggers throughout the entirety of the film, because he's going about things all the wrong way. He's handling things terribly, and he's doing horrific things as a means to an end to justify trying to find his daughter. Conversely, you have Jake, who you could make an argument doesn't even really care about finding his daughter. He cares more about his perfect record and just keeping his profile as perfect as possible and just being like the best police officer detective that he could possibly be. But he is going through things all the right way, following all the correct leads, eliminating leads when it's proper to eliminate leads, and methodically advancing the progress of the case. But these two conflicting viewpoints on how to handle things continually butt heads throughout the film. It's masterfully portrayed in the script and provided to us through the camera by Denis as a director. And these two actors are going toe to toe, and neither one backs down. And they have multiple scenes where they go head to head, and both of their performances are on the mark, captivating, engaging. You can't turn your head away. And they're not even like everything that's in this film.
Yeah.
Paul Dano is in this film, and he's fantastic. And now I'm drawing blanks on names.
Because like Maria Bello plays his wife, Terrence
Maria
Howard and Viola Davis are both.
Viola Davis, that's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, Viola Davis is in this as a mourning mother who's also lost a daughter, and just there's a lot of talent here, raw talent, and people really pouring their soul into this. I think Terrence Howard is in this too, and it's incredible that this movie exists, and like I wouldn't say no one talks about it, but like it was just completely swept under the rug by the award syndicate of that year.
Somehow.
Somehow no one recognized this. The only nomination this got at the Academy Awards was Best Cinematography, and it lost. Yeah. And it's just insane. If you have the chance, you absolutely deserve it to yourself to go find and seek out Prisoners from 2013 from Denis Villeneuve and watch this film, this crime drama thriller. You will be captivated, you'll be hooked. And I've preached all of this without, yep, there it is, without even like really approaching the narrative and all the things that happen, because I don't want to. It would be a disservice to you and the film to spoil anything that happens in this, but know that you will be captivated and you will be intrigued, and there will be so many twists and turns that if you say you see it coming, you're lying, and I don't believe you. There's no way you see it coming.
For a 2.5-hour film,
yeah,
this does not feel like a 2.5-hour
no.
film.
I got done with that, and I had to check the runtime. I thought it felt like an hour 45, hour 50. Like it just flows and runs that well. And that's not even to say it's a fast film. It's very slow and methodical in its pacing. There's many scenes where virtually no dialogue is said for long periods of time, but you're so engaged in everything that's happening that you don't even care. Like you're along for the ride, and the runtime is entirely irrelevant.
And any of you who have been keeping up with my Welcome to the Wasteland episodes, you've heard me talk about Roger Deakins a lot, seeing as he did most of the Coen Brothers films. And I've gushed enough over Roger Deakins, but the one thing I will add is, you have an amazing film when Denis Villeneuve and Roger Deakins can make a static shot of a tree incredibly haunting, and they're like, just the way that they tell this story is incredible. Absolutely. So go check out Prisoners. Show it some love. It deserves it. Now, I have two recommendations. Generally, I try to give a recommendation of a film that I've checked off my watch list, and a recommendation of a new film that I watched over the past week. And the film that I checked off my watch list that I enjoyed the most over this last week was Brief Encounter. And I heard about this film first from the podcast The Cinephiles, which I'm a humongous fan of The Cinephiles. They're on like 250 episodes at this point, but it's Steve Morris and John Roca who take a deep dive into a particular film. Might have influenced the show a little bit. You never know. But this is a British drama about two strangers who meet at a railway station who start having an affair. And like, this is from director David Lean, first off. And this is well before Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago. And it's a very intimate, small scale, just human drama that's like an hour and 25 minutes. And it's mostly just talking, but it's such a poignant and affecting human drama, and the journey that these two people go on. And also, it's very British. Like, this film is very British. And apparently this is a film that is has been ranked as one of the top British films ever made. So I watched this on HBO Max, so it should be streaming on there. It's, if you enjoy a good engrossing human drama, this isn't like Prisoners. No. Definitely not that intense, but it's something that it's just a very human story, and I enjoyed it a lot. Now, my other recommendation, which is a new film that's come out on VOD, How It Ends. And this is very much not your standard human drama. And this is Oddly enough, also like an hour and 20 something minutes. But this is from filmmaker Zoe Lister-Jones, who previously had done a film called Band-Aid that I enjoyed quite a bit. She has a very quirky, like hipstery vibe to her films. And it's like very colorful, very like tons of pastels and everything. And the premise of this film is it's a comet is going to destroy the world. It's the last day on Earth. And this woman, Liza, along with like the physical manifestation of her teenage self, go on an adventure figuring out what they're going to do with their last day on Earth. And there's certain things in it that are just like, you just have to accept it. Like the fact that how's her younger self just manifests next to her. And like some people can see her. And it's just like, it's, if you could get past that, it's a very interesting ride. It does feel more like a string of sketches and her interacting with weird and quirky characters along the way. Because listen to this cast list. So Finn Wolfhard's in it for like a whole like 30 seconds. Nick Kroll's in it. Logan Marshall Green, Fred Armisen, Glenn Howerton, aka Dennis from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Bradley Whitford, Olivia Wilde, Paul W. Downs, who's one of the co-creators of Broad City, Lamorne Morris, Paul Scheer, Helen Hunt, Colin Hanks, Charlie Day, and also Mary Elizabeth Ellis, who's also from Always Sunny, who plays the waitress. And Pauly Shore plays himself. And
good for Pauly Shore getting work.
Yeah. All these people just show up randomly as they're just wandering around town trying to find weed, because how else would you want to spend the rest of the time? And it's such a weird comedic romp just around, but also it's a very interesting and engaging introspective look at becoming comfortable with yourself and loving yourself, because like they physically have this woman and her younger self walking around together. They have conflict, and it's an interesting ride seeing them connect with each other. And the lead is Zoe Lister-Jones. So she wrote this, she directed this, and she starred in it. So this is on VOD right now. It's like $9.99. It's not quite the $19.99 of the rental, because like I don't know if I would recommend this if it was $20 for you to rent this.
Sure.
$10 and you're watching this with some friends, maybe. It's a fun time. It's an hour and 22 minutes. So it's just like a strange, quirky little thing. And I'm like,
it sounds fun. And there are way worse movies that you could spend an hour and 20 minutes on. So
yeah. And everybody, like, a lot of these characters don't have a lot of screen time, obviously, because there's no way in hell they would with that short of a film. But it's just like a strange, quirky, interesting romp through things. And like like Glenn Howerton's such a creep in it. And it's just like, of course Dennis would. But those are my recommendations. And obviously we talked about quite a few films, so hopefully all of you go out and see The Green Knight when it comes out, because why not? Yeah. And you should go check out Dr. Strangelove, and definitely check out Prisoners. That is an amazing film. And if I had to pick any of the films that have already released that we talked about today, that's definitely my favorite. Like, Prisoners is a fantastic film. But this was a lot of fun. Heath, I appreciate you coming on to the show. You should all check out Heath's work that's on SiftPop. It's nice actually having enough writers where we actually have enough entries for the best ever challenge, where it's like an actual like honorable mention section instead of like the sad one person that didn't get on the list. But Heath, I'm going to let you shamelessly plug real quick anything you would like that you're working on, and then we'll wrap up.
I'm not on the internet really much anywhere except for one spot, and that's on Letterboxd. I have a profile, the One Heath Bar, all one word, lowercase, and you could search it as Heath Lynch. It should come up either way. That's the only place you can find me, and that is intentional. And I plan to keep it that way, at least for now. But I watch a lot of film, and I try to review literally everything at least that I watch at least once. Currently, I'm doing a rewatch of all of the Disney studio animated films in chronological order. I'm in the wartime era right now. I write at least a 200-word blurb review on everything I watch. Some of the newer modern releases, or some of like the masterpiece classics of the past, I can write up to 2,000, 2,500 word reviews for. So put a lot of depth and detail on them. If you're interested in that, go ahead and follow me on Letterboxd, or of course, check out SiftPop.com. I do the best ever challenge with them weekly on Friday, and one review a month for them as well. As of now, I did Luca in June. If you want to go check out that review, and I'll actually be reviewing Jungle Cruise here when that comes out.
Will you be checking that out in theaters, or are you dropping the $29.99 to watch that on?
Well, just due to the timing, I will be dropping the $29.99. I'm actually going to Florida to visit my parents, and so I will be with them, and they'll be seeing me and the grandbaby. And I don't think it would be quite appropriate for me to be like, oh, by the way, I have to sneak away to go to the movie theater for a few hours. You guys totally got the baby, right? Like, you're fine. So like, I'll probably rent Jungle Cruise on Disney Plus while I'm at their place, and just get up early on Friday morning and watch it so I can write my review.
I will also actually be getting this on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And then telling all the people that have access to my Disney Plus account to go watch it to make me feel better for spending the $29.99.
See, my point of view, I know like a lot of people hate it. My point of view is I don't mind doing it, because when I consider if I wanted to go to see a movie and I'm taking my wife and the 7-year-old, and then the 1-year-old has to stay home with the babysitter, and then we're spending money on drinks and popcorn, and maybe we even went out to dinner with like $30, that's a steal. I'll do that to watch it at home and be able to pause and make my own popcorn, versus the potential $150 outing that would cost, like for tickets, food, drinks, babysitter, the whole shebang. So like, unless it's a movie I really desperately need to see on the big screen, $20-$30 to rent at home is pretty good for me. So I'm all for it.
Got to think about all the costs that go into things like this.
Yeah.
So, hey, I'm going to be doing the same. So I'll be watching it on Friday the 30th as well. But Heath, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.